Visit licensuraexams.com and try our samples completely free of charge.
There's a moment in this work where the door stops being metaphorical. A client tells you they have a plan for tonight, then refuses the hospital. I'm Eric Twaukman, and today we're working through executing voluntary and involuntary commitments. Here's the part that gets missed. Most students learn the criteria cold and never learn the sequence. On the NCMHCE exam, this arrives as a narrative where the danger is obvious and 4 reasonable-sounding actions are sitting in front of you, and the whole item turns on which one you do first. Let's start with the core concepts of executing voluntary and involuntary commitments. A commitment is the legal and clinical process of getting somebody admitted to a psychiatric facility for evaluation or treatment. Voluntary means the client agrees to it. They sign themselves in. Maybe a weekly session isn't enough anymore. Maybe they don't feel safe at home. Your work is helping them find a facility, telling them what to expect, and staying through it. Involuntary means somebody else starts the process because the client is a danger to themselves, a danger to others, or so gravely disabled they can't provide for their own basic needs. Food, shelter, safety. Look at that standard. Mental illness plus danger or grave disability that comes from it. Both halves have to be there. Here's what it looks like on the ground. Every state writes its own law and vocabulary. Some call it a 302, some a 5,000, 150, some a Baker Act petition, but the move is similar. You complete an emergency petition documenting what the client said, what behaviors you observed, and why you believe they meet criteria. Then law enforcement, or EMS, transports them to a designated receiving facility. The emergency hold is short, commonly 72 hours, and the exact length varies by state. During that window, a psychiatrist or another qualified professional evaluates them. If criteria are still met, the team petitions the court for extended commitment, petition for a formal hearing, petition for the client to have the right to legal representation, and finally have a judge deciding the course of action. Here's what this feels like in the room, because the exam won't say it. The client may be scared, furious, or feel betrayed. You explain what's happening anyway. Something like, "I'm concerned you're in danger right now, and I need to take steps to keep you safe." Rapport can take a hit here. A living client who's angry with you beats the alternative of their demise. They also keep their rights, and that's tested. Even under an involuntary hold, they're entitled to know why they're being held, to reach an attorney, to a hearing inside a set time frame, to refuse certain treatments with some emergency exceptions, and to the least restrictive level of care that fits. Commitment limits freedom of movement. It doesn't cancel their personhood. 2 things students mix up. First, they're not 2 doors into the same room. A voluntary client keeps the right to request discharge. There may be a short waiting period after that request, often 24 to 72 hours. But the status doesn't flip on its own. If the team now believes they meet involuntary criteria, the state's legal process has to be followed to convert it. Second, initiating isn't detaining. You may start the process. You're generally not transporting anybody. So what do you do first when one of these episodes starts? You assess your own assessment against your state's criteria before you reach for a phone or a form. That ordering is the whole hierarchy in miniature. Assess before you act. Least restrictive before most restrictive. Voluntary before involuntary. Involuntary is the last option, justified only when danger is imminent or grave disability is present and nothing less restrictive holds the risk. If you're not sure the criteria are met, read the statute and consult a colleague. Unsure isn't a reason to skip ahead. It's a reason to slow down by one step. Now, here are the traps you might encounter on your licensure exam. Trap 1. The option that has you committing the client on your own authority. Your instinct is good. You heard the plan, you feel responsible, and it seems backward that the person who knows the client best isn't deciding. Here's the rule that sorts it out. In most states, you can initiate, contact the crisis team, and complete the petition. The legal authority to detain sits with designated physicians, psychologists, judges, or law enforcement, depending on your state. You've taken the right action, but you are not the one committing the client. Trap 2. The client mentioned suicide, so the answer that starts the hold must be correct. Your instinct is good here too. You'd rather be over-careful than explain later why you weren't. But suicidal statements call for a risk assessment, not automatic hospitalization. Plenty of clients with ideation are managed safely with a safety plan, more frequent sessions, or voluntary treatment. That answer is right at a higher risk level than the narrative gave you. Trap 3. The voluntary client who asks to leave and, per the answer choice, can't until the team clears them. You're thinking admission means autonomy goes out the window. Voluntary keeps the right to request discharge, and converting to involuntary takes the state's legal process. 2 quick situations to consider. First, a telehealth session, and the client says they've taken an overdose and feel drowsy. You keep them on the line, call 911 to the location on file, and stay connected until help arrives. Second, a client returns after a 72-hour hold, still voicing suicidal ideation. You run a new risk assessment right there, evaluating ideation, plan, means, intent, and protective factors. Then you update the safety plan. Both run on the same feature. The standard is current danger, assessed by you. Here's the reasonable misread. Treating discharge as clearance and resuming routine work. Fair reading on your part, but the wrong frame. That hold ended because a legal window closed, not because anybody certified the risk gone. The near miss is acting on the label instead of the assessment. Here's a handful of terms you need to know. Grave disability. The client can't provide for their own food, shelter, or safety because of mental illness. It's the criterion students forget, and narratives lean on it hard for clients who aren't suicidal at all, just no longer able to keep themselves alive day to day. An older client who stopped eating and stopped paying for heat can meet it without ever saying a word about dying. Emergency hold. The short, involuntary period for evaluation, commonly 72 hours, depending on your state. Short by design. It buys assessment time, and it isn't treatment, which is why an answer choice that treats a hold as the end of the story is usually wrong. Least restrictive alternative. The standard that says you use the smallest intervention that answers the risk in front of you. It's the reason involuntary commitment sits at the bottom of the list, and it's the reasoning being tested when 3 answer choices all look technically defensible. Due process. The protections attached to extended commitment notice of why they're held, an attorney, a hearing, judicial review. If a choice has somebody held long-term on clinical judgment alone, with no court anywhere in the picture, that's your signal. And assisted outpatient treatment, sometimes called AOT, which is a court-ordered treatment in the community instead of the hospital. It's built for clients with a history of coming apart when treatment stops, and it's less restrictive than inpatient care. 3 things that should be your takeaways from this podcast. Voluntary is preferred, involuntary is a last resort, and the state's process governs the specifics. Your first move is always your own clinical assessment of the client. Your documentation becomes both clinical record and legal defense. So write what they said and what you saw, not that they seemed suicidal. Look up your state's criteria and hold length and put them on a card. When the situation gets loud, the sequence keeps you steady. Thanks for spending time reviewing this topic. I know what it costs when you're studying. This might show up on your exam, and the fact that you stayed for the entire podcast says something about the therapist you're becoming. Keep going. You can do this, and I believe you'll be successful. And remember, it's in there.